So we're going to talk about clustering today. And clustering is one of those things that's a little hard to describe. Um, but once you sort of understand what it is, it's kind of obvious. But it's basically about looking at your data and asking the question, are there groups of data within the whole data, right? So for instance, if we got the height and weight of all of the people in Hobart, we might see a cluster belonging to all the men, and we might see another cluster belonging to all the women. But we might not see that at all. It might be one big cloud of data, right? And if we were to look at the genes expressed in every single cell in the entire body, we would expect to see clusters within that data set. All the muscle cells will express these kind of genes, and all of these red blood cells will express all of these kind of genes, all right? But the point here is that we don't have the label. We don't know that there are specific groups. So in the height and weight data, I didn't tell you who was men and women, right? You just got a collection of data points and you had to try and figure out, are there clusters in there? In the cell data, I didn't tell you which cells belonged or which gene expression patterns belong to which cells. I just gave you the numbers, and it's your job to find the data in there, or the clusters in there, I should say. And this is a common problem that data scientists get given because all of the time people want to subdivide their data up and try and figure out, this is one of these things, is there some structure in the data, which is to say, are there specific um, classes or groups or organisms or something in there, or is it really just one big lump where all of the data is the same? So let's kind of get into it and uh, see what I'm talking about, because it still might not be completely obvious. So I'm going to make some cluster data. I'm going to make some data with three clusters in two dimensions. So I'm going to write a little script to do it. So I'm going to say n equals 100, right? So this is going to be the number of samples in each cluster. And it's two-dimensional data, right? So I'm going to need a feature 1 and I'm going to need a feature 2, right? These are our two dimensions. And we are going to make each one of these is going to be a vector. So we're going to do C to join some numbers up. And instead of me having to type in these numbers manually, we can use the rnorm function, right? And that gives us normally distributed random numbers, all right? So I'm going to have three of these, 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to have the same thing for the feature 2, okay? Now, if I don't specify much in here, it's just going to give me random numbers with a mean of 0 and standard deviation of 1. It's even saying that on that little tooltip there. So we say n. I should have put this in first before I copied and pasted everything. N. I want n of each of them, 100 of each, right? And then I want the mean of this one to be 1. And we'll leave the standard deviation line. Actually, let's just go mean equals 1 to make our, the mean of this cluster in feature 1 is going to be like 5, and the mean of this one is going to be back to 1. Okay, and then we'll say the mean of this one will be 1, so there'll be a cluster centered at 1, 1 on the plot. There'll be another one at the mean of 5, let's say, so another cluster at 5, 5, and then another cluster at, oh, I wish we put this one. Actually, why don't I put this at 10? So we've got them evenly spaced across feature 1 and then up, down, up on this. And that should kind of work. So now we've got feature 1 and feature 2, and then we're going to put this into a data frame. Data df contains what's returned by data.frame. So we're going to make a data frame, and the column x is going to contain all of this number that we made in feature 1, and the column called y is going to contain all of the data that we put in feature 2. And let's plot this, plot data frame. All right, and then I press the source button and it should run all of that. And here we are. All right, so my head's in the way, but here we have some clustered data, right? So you can imagine Yeah, and let's just go head of data frame down here. And so we have two columns, X and Y, right? But these columns have clusters within them. And we can see it here on this nice 2D plot that we plainly have three clusters. This is clustered data, right? You can see that all these data points are kind of, well, it's what's hard to define. What exactly makes a cluster? There is no single definition, but it's somehow some kind of data types that are all kind of like each other. They sort of share something. And so this cluster is where both the X value and their Y value is low. This cluster here is where the X value is medium, but their Y value is high. And then this cluster here is where the X value is high and the Y value is low. Okay, so we get these three clusters. Now, obviously in low dimensional space and 2D, we don't need to do any clustering. I mean, in reality, if we were truly doing this, we probably still would do some clustering to sort of give our intuition some credence. Just like if you have two, you're going to do a t-test between a sample that's all the way down here and another sample that's all the way up there, and it's going to be significant, but you still do it just because, you got to, but it's not necessary. It's no more necessary if you do data, two samples of this far apart than it is to say that there are three clusters here. We can all see there are three clusters in this data set. So what do we do? Okay, there are dozens of clustering algorithms, maybe even 100. Certainly, if you look at all of the flavors of each type of algorithm, there's easily more than 100. And they all do slightly different things, but they all do, no, they don't all do, but most of them do kind of similar things. They undergo some kind of iterative process where they use something to sort of make some kind of guess about where the clusters might be, and then kind of say, all right, who looks likely to be in this cluster? And they might choose the next nearest data point, and then kind of say, okay, well, if now my cluster contains these 2 points, where does it look like the cluster is now? And they keep kind of just grabbing data points and kind of doing this kind of looking at the nearest thing until they get to some point where they say, all right, I've either grabbed all the data points, assigned all the data points to a cluster, or it looks like I've finished for some other reason, something like that. And so we're going to talk about one called k-means, right? And k-means is pretty simple to sort of get a vague understanding. And how does k-means work, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to copy this image. I'm going to go to my old friend Paint. We're going to paste it in here. All right. What does k-means do? Right. So k-means starts by just guessing that there are k clusters. You have to tell it, right? You tell it there are k clusters, and it guesses the center of each cluster by just picking 3 data points at random. All right, so it might say, all right, it's going to say, this is my first cluster center, right? It might pick, let's do blue, all right, blue, right? Here is my second, it kind of looks like a black, doesn't matter. Here is my second cluster center, and then here is my third cluster center, okay? Didn't do a great job. We can say that it's wrong, but k-means can't, right? Because it's kind of hard to define what a cluster is. So it has these first guesses, all right? And then the next step is it says, all right, who is closest to each center? Like it goes through every single data point and it says, are you closer to the blue, the red, or the green? And it divvies up the data points. So it then will say, all right, I think, and I'm just going to sort of eyeball this, probably, so you can do it with a straight line because these are always straight line borders. All right, here is the border between the blue and the red, and this must actually split it about here, right? Here is my blue border, and I don't want to do that, right? And then the red border between the red and the green is here, right? And so it's going to say, all right, everybody in here belongs to green, everybody in here belongs to red, and everybody in here belongs to blue. Simple enough so far. And then it says, what is the center of this cluster if this is the case, right? And how does it do that? It just adds up the X value of all of these data points and divides it by however many data points there were, i.e. what is the average X value, what is the average Y value, and it does that for all of the clusters and all of the dimensions. And then it says here is where the mean is. So we've now calculated k-means. All right, and what's going to happen? Well, our red mean is going to end up somewhere, and again, I'm just eyeballing this, right, somewhere about here. Our blue mean is going to shift probably a little bit this way. Okay, a little bit there. And our green mean, because we did the green one about right, is going to sit about here. All right, and now it plays the game again, right? So let us copy and paste from RStudio again. Copy image. We're going to put it so we got one at about 5, 6. We'll just try and remember, right? It's only the blue. Okay, so we're just going to paste, right? And what did we get? We had a red one sitting about here. Whoops, a red one sitting about here. Our green one was pretty much right on the money. And our blue one was still pretty far away. All right, it was somewhere over here. Okay. And as I say, then it repeats and it says, all right, where are all of the boundaries? And it says, okay, all of the points between about here and here belong to green. These belong to red. That must go to about there. And that must go to about there. Okay. And it goes, all right, where's the mean in this? And so we can see, in this case, the blue mean now is going to probably sit about here, right? The red mean is going to move probably a little bit this way, and the green mean probably sits exactly where it is, and just goes round and around and around until it stops changing. Then it will say, I'm done, right? And by I stop changing, I mean these mean positions stop changing. The mean positions stop changing by any significant amount. So maybe if there are millions and millions of data points, it might just ever so slightly be drifting as 1 or 2 or 3 little data points are slowly shifting side. But basically it's done. Or it can just be jumping around. Every iteration, it comes to completely different solutions and it goes, I don't know what's going on here. This seems silly. Okay. So has a variety of different conditions it stops, but what we want it to do is reach some stable point. Now, so this is k-means, all right? K-means is a relatively fast algorithm. It is relatively stable, which is to say it doesn't often get to that position where on every single iteration it's coming to a completely different solution. And it performs relatively well. And there are also not millions of possible options that we can set. So this makes k-means quite a good algorithm. It also has a feature that we're not going to investigate, which is if we get a new data point that comes along, right? And somebody says, oh, what group, if I get a new data point that is, is y equals 1 and x equals 8, what group should it belong to? We'll say, it belongs to this group, right? And that can be quite useful in a whole bunch of cases, right? So if we've done some kind of, we're saying these are cancer groups, right? And if you get this cancer, you're fine. If this cancer, you're in big trouble, and this is actually non-cancerous, right? We can say, oh, look, this person has cancer, but it's not super invasive, something like that. So k-means is quite a good algorithm, and in the next video, we're actually going to run it.